All right. This morning or today, I'm here with Nick Barnhart, and Nick is an business insurance advisor. He's located in the Detroit area, and Nick specializes in working with local specialty trade contractors, such as landscapers, concrete contractors, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, just to name a few. And he helps them to control their total cost of risk and their insurance costs while making sure that they have the right coverages in place to protect their business. And one thing that makes Nick really different as an insurance advisor is he spent 20 years in the construction business. In fact, he still oversees his family's construction business. And so he has an inside knowledge of what construction is all about and how it works and what the insurance needs are. And the other thing is Nick prides himself on being available and responsive to his clients. He's always there. You call him and you'll reach him and you'll get an answer. And so what we're going to be talking about today are the three big questions that contractors typically have about insurance and or should have about insurance, thinking about, geez, how can they really control their insurance costs and make sure they have the right coverage, and probably even most important, make sure they're working with the right insurance advisor. So we're going to get into these three questions, and the top question typically that contractors have is, hey, what's it going to cost? What's the price? How can I get the lowest price? And we'll break that down into a couple different areas so that you as the contractor understand what really makes up how your insurance is priced by the insurance carriers and the role that the insurance agent plays in helping to control that cost. The second question that a lot of contractors have would be, hey, is my agent accessible when I need to make a policy change or I need to get certificates of insurance out, which are extremely important for contractors. And then finally, we'll hit upon what are some of the right coverages or essential coverages that contractors should consider to protect their business, the basic coverages, and maybe some coverages that maybe you've heard about, but you really should consider having. So welcome, Nick. Glad to have you, and we'll get into this. You ready?
Yeah, for sure. Good morning. Good morning.
Okay. So first of all, let's talk about this whole issue of price. And a lot of people, a lot of contractors, they're used to bidding on jobs. And so they're thinking about the whole bidding process. But what happens is if that's the thinking, sometimes that can be a danger for contractors to think that they can call up and get a bunch of different agents to bid on their insurance. Sometimes that can work against them, especially right now where we're having what's called a hardening of the market. The carriers are increasing their pricing, and sometimes it's even tough to get some of the coverages out there. So let's dive into this. First of all, what are some of the things that you're hearing from contractors when it comes to pricing? And then we'll get into this a little bit more. So what are some things that, I guess, first of all, that contractors ask you about pricing, and how do you address that up front?
Some of them are increases with the workers' comp with the audits. So if you're honest up front with your policy, with your payroll, with sales, I'm able to, keep that price in line with you because there's not going to be no surprises when the audits come in at the end of the year and then have to write a check for unforeseen expenses that you didn't realize in the beginning. So that's the first thing is keeping honest with me on your sales and your workers' comp, on the payroll, and on all the autos as well. So that's one of them there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think, a lot of times, you know, it really helps to let the agent, the advisor you're working with, know exactly what's happening in the business, because sooner or later you're going to have to pay that if it's an increase in an audit or whatever. And plus, uh, insurance carriers know what's happening in your business. The more you can give them about all your operations, the better, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Another advantage is working with someone that's in the business. I understand, your needs as a contractor, being in the business for 20 years. So, but our carriers are in line with contractors. So, it has the advantage of dealing with someone like me as an independent contractor, having multiple carriers to shop your policy around instead of having to go outside of me or to other agencies looking for pricing. I'm able to go to all the carriers I have and then try to shop the best rate for you within my office.
Right. Yeah, that's a great point because a lot of times, contractors think, gee, I can get a bunch of different agents in here and that will get me the best price. But it really can work against you, right? It could be that, you know, because typically carriers are only going to work with one agent. So if they get a submission or a request for a quote from multiple agents, it could lock you out of a market, right?
Oh, for sure. Yep, exactly. They could lock you out. So that's the advantage of being independent. I could also sometimes we could bundle your policy as an advantage to keep your auto work comp and general liability with the same carrier. And other times it might be not be advantageous to do that. Sometimes you might want to go ahead and put the auto with a different carrier. They have better rates for the auto, or also with the workers comp. So sometimes we even have to split up the policy on three different carriers to give you the best rate. So with being independent and having all the carriers, I can move you around to best fits your needs.
But that's a great point. So, sometimes if you're and I guess it depends on the type of business, how the carriers look at it, what the appetite is. But some carriers want, they're aggressive and they want the whole account. Where other times maybe they're really keen on the work comp and maybe the general liability, but they're not really that great on the business auto, or their rates aren't really that competitive on business auto for whatever the reason. And so what you're saying is you have the flexibility then to break out that auto and find the best carrier for that line of coverage, right?
Yes, for sure. That's what we're able to do. You typically find that the workers' comp is going to have to be pulled out. A lot of these contractors, some of them are bigger, some are smaller. A lot of the smaller ones, their payroll is not enough for the carrier to accept them. So sometimes we have to break it out and go with a different carrier that'll accept the smaller payrolls. Some of these contractors as well.
Right, right. What I was going to ask a question. What are we seeing, or what are you seeing as far as rates? You mentioned on work comp rates, you're starting to see some of the rates going up, or I guess the underwriters are maybe asking more questions. They're being a little bit more selective. Are you seeing increases, across the board in other lines of coverage? Let's say business auto, general liability. What's kind of the overall climate on insurance rates right now as we're talking here September 2020?
Well, the rates in general, across the board have kind of been going up a little bit, but with our carriers, their appetite is strong for contractors. So they've been staying pretty steady actually for the contractors. So that's why
Okay, that's good news.
to be involved with someone that deals with contractors, and that's kind of what we like to run with. So
Okay.
yeah, most definitely we're doing good with that and keeping the premiums tight for you.
Okay. So it sounds like, maybe sum up a little bit on, some of the things that contractors can do to really control their pricing is, first of all, be upfront about what's happening in your operation, about your payrolls, your revenues, what type of work you're really doing, all facets of it. Let the agent know what equipment you have, the trucks you have, who you're working with on jobs, your subcontractors, that type of thing. The second thing is it's probably more important to select your agent up front and really make a decision to work with one agent to help you to shop the market and find the best carriers for your particular business, rather than parading in a whole bunch of different agents that you think might be able to find you the best market. Because what happens is it can really work against you, especially now as we're in a hardening market where you may be aced out of a market, or even if you've done that in the past, and there are carriers that may be a good market for you right now. Maybe in the past they just never got a fair shot on your business because the other agent that controlled it didn't really necessarily champion you to that market. So anything else as far as the pricing part, Nick, that contractors need to be aware of?
Yeah, so like when you're hiring employees, you have a bunch of vehicles, maybe you have a fleet of vehicles. You want to make sure you're hiring people that have a good driving record. You want
That's a great point. Yeah.
MVRs. You don't want to just be hiring people with very bad driving records, and then when you get when they check the MVRs, all of a sudden they're going to raise your auto policy because of bad MVR for drivers, or you have a lot of accidents in that regard. So you want to make sure the people you hire for your team that that you trust driving your vehicles also have good driving
Yeah.
records as well.
So basically, and that's a good point, is you probably want some type of hiring procedures to be able to vet people. Yeah, it might be tough to find skilled workers, but you still want to be able to check them out, check their MVRs, check their references, because you may be hiring someone that could really cause you an issue on maybe your automobile coverage or even on workers' compensation. You could be buying a claim there that could cost you over a period of 3 years, when it hits your experience mod. So that's a great point, Nick.
For
So,
sure.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. Let's move on into, you're talking about, maybe hiring employees, policy changes, getting out those certificates of insurance, having access to the agent. Let's talk a little bit about that issue and why that's so important for contractors. Um, and maybe the biggest thing would be the whole certificates of insurance, because that really determines a lot of the cash flow for a contractor. And since you've been on that end of it, let's talk about some of the issues around, certificates of insurance, and maybe a little bit on your insights, looking at it from the insurance advisors and what are carriers concerned about? What are some of the concerns for you as an advisor that you need to really do the job and get that certificate of insurance in the hands of the contractor?
Right, for sure. So we have a lot of contractors that are bidding on large projects, and the general contractor might require them to have an umbrella policy with an extra 2-3 million on there. You might be have to be insured as primary, additional insured, and a lot of contractors just go ahead and bid this job without knowing the requirements of their insurance. So they go ahead, bid it, call me, say I need a certificate, but the general needs this, 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 and this, and then it causes an increase in their policy. It could be quite costly. So if the contractors are willing to have an advisor like me, give me a call, be in contact with me on a regular basis, I can go ahead and quote this out with the underwriters previously before they bid for the policy or bid for the job. That way I could tell them what the costs are going to be, so they could include that in their bids. That way they're not getting shocked with price increase on their policy, and they're not expecting that when they bid the projects with larger general contractors. So if you get quite costly, having to add up all these extra requirements for generals.
So,
Another one.
so what I'm hearing you say then is, geez, as soon as you're bidding or thinking about bidding on a project, you need to contact Nick or your insurance advisor and let them know, rather than waiting until after you get the award on the project. Because what happens is the based upon the insurance requirements of that project, it may have to go back into the underwriter at the insurance carrier, because the project may be requesting some coverages or situations that aren't or weren't contemplated by that underwriter. So in essence, they're re-underwriting your account every time
Sure.
you're requesting a certificate of insurance. And I think a lot of contractors don't really realize that. They just think, geez, I have insurance, just issue this certificate of insurance. And they don't realize that maybe there's some differences of coverages here that are
That could
hidden
also
within
cause
the
a delay.
project.
Right, it could cause a delay to starting the project because I have to send all the information to underwriting to try to get the additional coverages. So there could be a delay of a week to 2 weeks, and it might cause a problem with the general because they want you on the job starting it. So that's another issue we have too, is they're waiting to the last minute to let me know that you need it, and then I have to deal with underwriting back and forth. And who knows, worst case scenario, if you're a new business, you might not even get approved for for some of these requirements because you're so new to the business, you don't have the experience. So that's
Right,
another
right.
issue too. So yeah, it's definitely could be a problem for them with the certificate of insurances. Get on the job and try to create cash flow. Correct?
So yeah, so it may be, geez, you may, if you don't have that certificate that you can hand over to the general, you may not get on the job, first of all, and that's really not leaving a good taste in the mouth of that general, uh, because it could delay the whole project. Normally, if you're one of the trades coming into a project, the general has you scheduled out and lined up, and there are other trades behind you to complete the rest of the project. So you could cause delays, or even depending upon how the contract's written, you could have penalties because you didn't issue the certificate at the right time, right?
Oh, correct. Or like I said, you might even lose the job on top of
Yeah.
it. I make
Lose the
contractors will.
job, or yeah,
Yeah,
or obviously there would be a delay in getting paid on the job. So yeah, you can create a lot of problems for yourself by not handling the certificates correctly. And so again,
correct. Or and sometimes the
again,
worst case scenario is some of the contractors might take the job on, and the general might like to let them start the project, work the project, and then at the end of the project, before they get paid, they need the certificate. And sometimes, hey, I have to go through underwriting to get the certificate to get these additional requests of limits increased. That might hold up a delay from you getting your check as well, because sometimes, like you said, the contractors let you start working, but they're not going to pay you to get the certificate. So the job might be complete. You're waiting on underwriting to get the certificate to get your check, and this is another dilemma we run into sometimes.
right.
So,
Well, and it seems like, boy, that would be completely after the fact, and you could complete the job. You're asking the insurance agent to get the certificate after the fact, and boy, you it may be that you need to pay more for the insurance as a result of the requirements is the certificate. So you could have invested in the job and actually lost money on the job, right?
correct, correct. You don't
So
want
yeah,
that to
that's
happen to you. That's why you need to call me if you got a big job coming up, and let me go over your policy, and we can review it to see what we can do to make sure you're covered going into these large projects.
okay. Yeah. So again, uh, what Nick's saying on this is, hey, when you're bidding on a job, or you're thinking about bidding on a job, contact Nick up front before you really even submit that bid on the job. Get the all the projects will have insurance requirements in there. Get all the information about that project to Nick as early as possible, so he can take that information, contact his underwriters that are the for the insurance company that you're insured with, and so he can handle that for you and get the answers that you can plug into your bid, so everything that's going into the insurance requirements and the cost of that insurance on that project, right?
For sure, definitely.
Okay. Sounds good. So finally, let's talk about, we talked about price, we talked about, responsiveness, how the working with the agent up front, both on the pricing part of it, certificates of insurance. And this same thing applies not only certificates of insurance, we didn't really talk about this, but anytime you're thinking about changing your operations, I would think it would be a good idea. You're adding a new truck or a new piece of equipment, you bought a property or whatever, you want to know that as early on as possible, right?
Oh, for sure, most definitely. Let us know right away when you're buying a new truck, so we get insured right away before you bring it to the shop. Like I said, another property you're going to be working on, or you purchase a new building. Let us know so we get the insurance on it and the right coverages for that. Especially if
Okay.
it's some of these guys are buying buildings and they have to do some work on it, so we want to make sure you're covered in that regard too.
Right, right.
Work on them.
So let's talk about right coverages. Obviously the pricing is important, but it's, if you don't have the right coverages to protect your business, you could have the lowest price in the world and you still could be creating a problem for your business. So let's talk about some of the basic coverages that contractors should consider, and maybe some coverages that maybe they heard a little bit about, but they should seriously take a look at them, because our environment, as far as risk for business, changes. The legal environment changes. The things that can happen to businesses change. And we'll talk about some of those things. So let's talk about the basic things. And you hit upon them. We mentioned them here: workers' comp, business auto. What are some of the other basic coverages that contractors should really have in place for their business?
Obviously, the general liability is, like a must, right? But on top of that, you might want to, consider professional liability. In case, some of the jobs you might make a mistake, and you're not covered for the certain kind of work you do. So professional liability is another one, additional kind of coverage we could add for you to help
So,
you out with that.
so professional liability reminds me of something. I just had a guy. I'm in the midst of selling my mother's house here in Pennsylvania, and we need to put in a new sewer system. And so there was an engineer that came out to design the system, because it needs to be so far away from uh, the neighbor's wells, and the specs on how large the drain field needs to be and all that. So if he designs that wrong and he gets sued, that's what you're talking about as far as professional liability, because he's did the design of that project, right? Where
Correct.
general liability wouldn't cover something like that.
Right. That's another, yeah, outside the normal, the general liability, professional liability will help you cover you in a situation like that. Sometimes landscapers might do design with drainage, and it might cause an issue down the road. They didn't do it correctly and things start flooding out, and it might come back onto them. So if the general liability doesn't cover it, if you have professional liability, it's another backup to make sure you're covered in certain situations like this, like you had mentioned.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, definitely. How about some of the property coverages? How about how do contractors cover like their tools or equipment, materials on the job, those types of things. They can have a lot of money tied up in all those things, right?
Oh,
And
correct.
sometimes they get vandalized or they get stolen or whatever.
Yep, for sure. So someone like on the bigger stuff, you would want to have it scheduled on your policy, like your excavators, your bobcats, skid steers, bigger equipment, like around $5,000 to $10,000 and up. And then the smaller equipment, you just have like a blanket policy for like simple stuff like shovels. With the landscapers, you got weed whackers,
Okay.
blowers, things like that would be under a blanket policy. So
Yeah,
that's
because you could have those things, coming and going all the time. So you probably don't want to say every time you buy a new weed whacker or, blower or whatever that you want to, schedule out the insurance on that. You just want a blanket limit is what you're saying, and that kind of thing.
correct. Yeah, yeah. So
And
that's how you
how
go about
about
that.
covering like materials, maybe drywall, wood, lumber, all that kind of thing. How does that work for a contractor?
So typically, you got to make sure that's going to be included in your policy. You be able to cover like materials. And most policies, if you're working the right, right agent, sorry, the right agent, be able to make sure you have that typical coverage in there. A lot of the policies, like carpentry or general contractor policies, a lot of that coverage is already included in the policies as well.
Okay.
So that's
So a lot of times how it's packaged up, you'll have some coverages for those types
right.
of things. And
Right.
again, I would imagine you know, if you have anything out of the ordinary, a job that's out of the ordinary, they need to talk to you about that to see, hey, is the policy going to cover that, or what's really happening, right?
Right, for sure. If you're having like you know, different circumstances where the materials are, out of the norm, and you're gonna have a, high value, materials on the job, maybe some steel or, you know, other things like precious. Who knows? Some people have some
Maybe some
crazy.
high value equipment if you're,
Yeah,
a specialty HVAC contractor, something like that, where there's really like a large generator or, whatever that might be. That's really
right.
high ticket item.
Yeah, we
So,
might have to add that onto the policy. But in general, if you're working with the right carriers, they include a lot of this coverage for you. That's why it's important to make sure the carriers you guys are working with and the agent that you're working with, kind of specializes in, the contractors themselves, and that's their appetite. So they're able to include a lot of these coverages for you already in the policy.
right. And which is going to be in the long run less expensive, less headaches because you know it's covered. So you have a little bit more peace of mind knowing that it's just included in the policy, right? So, okay.
Correct, correct.
How about let's talk about maybe some coverages. They maybe it's not they're not as prominent maybe for contractors, but they're certainly getting a lot of attention in different businesses, and maybe there's some application for them. Because I hear this with when I talk to a lot of insurance advisors, and that would be the two coverages or the areas of risk that are maybe newer risks or more emerging, more serious types of risks would be in the area of cybersecurity and also employment practice liability. Let's talk a little bit about those two coverages, Nick, and maybe how they would apply to contractors.
Okay. Yeah, also those are more and more those are being included in the general liability portion of your
Okay.
policy. It's like an add-on which is included in a lot of with these carriers because like you said the risk is getting more. So that's why the carriers are adding this along as well into the policies. So with the cyber risk, you don't want anybody to go in there and start stealing all your documents, your precious documents. You know, you have a lot of say tax ID numbers are in there, credit card numbers are in there.
Right.
Employees might have employee social security numbers in there, so this could help with,
So there could be some sensitive personal information, either from your clients where you have credit card information, home addresses, employee social security numbers that a lot of times contractors, I think, well, I don't really have, a lot of this information, but they really do, right?
right, correct, they do. Said a lot of it too. Nowadays, more and more people aren't doing stuff on paper. Everything's on the computers. Like you said, a lot of the customer client information could be on there too. You don't want that to be get into the wrong hands as well.
Definitely, definitely. How about employment practices? Let's talk about maybe some scenarios where that would come into play. We touched upon it a little bit about, hiring, not hiring and getting a potential problem with a driver or a work comp claim. What are some other areas there that maybe would apply to employment practices?
Okay, let's say contractors, it could be something with like with harassment of another worker. A lot of times it's more like it's an office space with the employment practices, but yeah, there are things that can still happen with the contractors in regards to that. But we don't see too much problems with the employment practices with the contractors very much.
Yeah, but it still can happen. Like you said, it
Correct.
could be an harassment situation, a wrongful termination,
Right.
uh, those types of things. And a lot of times those can, you're always going to have an attorney involved whenever there's an employment practice claim. And just if an attorney's involved, it can get high dollar pretty quickly.
Correct. Yep.
So, okay. In any other coverages, I think we pretty much covered all of them as far as the important coverages for contractors. Anything else that we missed there, Nick, that you can think of?
I think we're pretty good. It's just like I said, the biggest thing is you want to work with an agent that knows your business and that has the carriers that want your business. Some carriers don't want aren't that's not the appetite that they want. So that helps
Mhm.
when you find an agent that really knows the business, is there for you, and make sure they're able to easily be contacted when you need them. Some of these guys
Okay.
don't answer the phone quite often, or you call the office and they're not around. They
Right,
don't call you
right.
back. Most of my clients have my cell phone. I'm easily able to be contacted. Not a problem. I'll call you right back. I know with these certificates of insurance, they're needed to get to get paid to get on the job. So that's my main goal here too, is to try to get these out to you guys to you're not getting held up on getting paid or getting work started. So
Okay.
kind of what I try to do to help agents out, or sorry, my
Okay.
clients out.
Well, I think you pretty much summarized, what we talked about these three big questions. It's really if you if you're wanting the best price, the best service, and the right coverages, it's critical to contact Nick early on in the process and work with him and reveal everything about your operation. You know, and it's really important that Nick understands all the facets of your operation to be able to go to the right carriers, to negotiate the best pricing, and to place the coverages with the right carriers, whether it's all with one carrier or it's split up with multiple carriers. And also, the certificates of insurance, the policy changes, get contact Nick early on that to make sure it's handled the way that you want it to be handled. It's not going to create an issue for you down the road. So good stuff, Nick. So finally, how do people get a hold of you? What's the best way to get a hold of you? And, if they do have insurance needs, how do they get a hold of Nick Barnhart?
You could just give me a call. My number is 586-506-0340, or you could, find us on the internet. We have a website, barnhartinsurance.com.
Okay.
On there, we got some information for you guys on there about policies and some needs you might need on there.
Okay.
So, yeah,
All right. Okay. Okay. Repeat that phone number again. Just do it real slow so people hear it again. So, because I forgot.
Yeah. No worries. Yeah, it's 586-506-0340. And again,
Okay.
the website, barnhartinsurance.com. Pretty simple.
Okay. Very good, Nick. Good stuff. And so if you're a contractor, get a hold of Nick and he'll take care of you. So
Thank you.